What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I have another Fallout 76 video for you guys here today. So going ahead and wasting no time, I'm continuing my special perk guide series. I have done one for perception and for endurance. Some of my original subscribers who may still be around remember those series. So with all the perk updates going on, I think it's time to move on to agility. So what is agility? Well, in previous Fallout games, agility affected your action points, your sneak, your small guns, and your reload skills. However, in Fallout 76, reload speed and small guns are not stats that are modified by the special tree itself, rather the perks within it. And with the updates coming to Fallout 76 here soon, lots of the perk cards have been changing, so that's why the series has been on the back burner until today. The first perk we're going to take a look at is Sneak. I will give this a score of B. Its max rank gives you 75% harder to detect when sneaking, with the con of does nothing upon reaching 30 points of agility. And this is a little myth inside the Fallout 76 community. I don't necessarily believe it completely. However, the more agility you have, the harder it is for enemies to detect you. That is a fact, that is something that is true. However, I feel like the perk does something. If it's minor, it still does something that can be helpful. Maybe particularly on something like melee builds that we have to get in close. It might make you harder to detect by enemies using that. In the background gameplay, you can see I have 18 agility with none of my unyielding armor on. But in this clip here, I put on the sneak perk with my unyielding armor, meaning my sneak is around 33, with the sneak card giving them plus 25% harder to detect while sneaking. And you can see I am pretty significantly harder to detect. My bar's barely moving, and I walked right by several enemies right in front of them, and they did not detect me for anything. So I don't know if this is a perk card worth running. Especially if all it changes to agility. It's a perk that I probably will just skip out on these days, as enemies are going to die pretty fast if you're using something like a sneak build anyway, so being detected isn't necessarily a problem. Action Boy and Action Ghoul receive a rank of A. At its maximum rank, it gives you plus 45% AP regen speed, with the pro of these perks being that it stacks with other sources of AP regen. A con of these perks, however, is that it becomes less necessary as you progress into the end game. In the clip you're seeing in the background, this is me with no Action Boy equipped, using just Packinlight and the rejuvenated perk while being fully hydrated, so I'm getting that plus 45% AP regen on top of my plus 25% AP regen from my legendary armor. And as you can see, that's pretty fast. And when you put on something like Company T, it just becomes even faster. So it just begs the question, why waste 3 perk points on a perk like this when you don't necessarily have to? And with the competitive nature of the agility tree now, it kind of means you have to cut corners in any way possible, so this is a perk that can very easily be on the chopping block. Adrenaline gets a rank of A through F depending on what rank of the card you pick. At max rank you get plus 10% to a max of 60% damage per kill for 30 seconds. However, at its maximum rank it costs 5 points, which is substantial. Which is why I believe the lower you have the perk, the better it is, as it leaves more options open for build crafting. This is a highly competitive skill tree, so the more perks you can fit in the better, and a 36% damage buff is nothing to scoff at. Looking at Ammo Smith, this perk gets a rank of C, with its max rank producing 80% more ammo, and I have a note here saying that it is strictly a crafting perk and will not be on all the time, which is true. So these are what I categorize as crafting perks. They are perks you put on for crafting things that you normally would not have on 24/7. You'll put it on, make what you want to make, and then immediately take it back off. So seen here on the background gameplay, you can see the perk and its effect. It is making me produce much more ammo. However, if you're going to use this perk to make ammo, you might as well put on Ammo Factory, the legendary perk, as these two stack together, giving you plus 350% ammo production, so no brainer there. Born Survivor, I will give this a score of B. At its maximum rank, falling below 40% health will automatically use a stim pack once every 2 seconds. A con of this perk is that you will quickly run out of stim packs, as it will proc if you're running something like a low health build. This will pretty much proc every single time you take damage. So in every instance, whether you're in power armor or a commando player like I am, you are going to be blowing through your stim packs because every time you get hit, you will be using a stim pack, regardless if you need to or not. Covert Operative is a perk I would give a rank of A. At its maximum rank, your ranged attacks do an additional 50% sneak attack damage. In the gameplay, you can see me shooting this super mutant suicider. Actually, no. I don't know which one I'm shooting. No, it is the suicider. Regardless, you can see the damage numbers on there with and without the perk. And when you compare them, it only comes out to a 6% damage difference, so I don't know what's exactly going on here. Deadman Sprinting gets the F of shame for this video, and the sole reason for this is that it does not stack with the speed deviant mutation, which pretty much everyone's going to use. The speed deviant mutation itself puts you at maximum move speed, so no perk that buffs movement speed is going to stack with it, so they're all useless if you have the mutation. And to prove this, I will do a race for you with and without the perk. Dodgy will get a D from me solely because of the change the devs are making on the PTS. It will no longer give you the minus 30% damage reduction, and instead will give you a 5% chance to evade damage with no cooldown. The problem with this is that the evade system is pretty unreliable and it works based off of your armor. And it's just, it doesn't feel good. The perk on the PTS is pretty much useless. I'm not even exaggerating that. I hope they revert the change to Dodgy, as it was a really good perk as is. But if this change actually goes through, you will see a substantial difference between this and its current state. So I would just prepare yourself to not be using the perk. Enforcer is a perk that you typically use to down something like a Scorch Beast by crippling its limbs. However, it's changed on the PTS to give you plus 20% damage per crippled limb, which is a extremely good effect, and I will showcase a build using that perk on something like a commando build for you guys at a later date. It's something I'm really excited to put together for you guys, so I hope you enjoy that. It is a very, very strong perk. Looking at Escape Artist, I give this a score of A. Whenever you sneak, you will lose enemies, and you no longer make noises while you're in stealth. A con of this, however, is that the enemies must be able to see you when you activate the perk. When the enemies are able to see me, if I just re-crouch in front of them, it procs that stealth boy effect, which makes them lose me. And my guess for this is that whenever the perk is activated, it's coded to be a stealth boy activation, even if it's only for like a second long, and that's why the enemies lose you, because whenever you pop a stealth boy, it gives you the max amount of stealth possible. However, if you break line of sight, like you'll see me do here in a second, and you re-enter stealth mode, you'll remain in danger since you're not breaking their sight on you, technically, whenever you proc that stealth boy, so it's not doing anything for you. Kind of a weird functionality. It's something that I'm not even sure the devs are aware of, but, you know, it's still an excellent perk, and I highly advise using it. Evasive is a 1-star perk I give a score of A, however it does not work with power armor. This perk is essentially another form of protection. It's another lifeline that low health players have to help keep themselves alive. It only costs 1 point, so it can easily slot into any build, and while I don't think the evade system is particularly great in any way, any perk that can help keep you alive like this is something that is pretty desirable. Goat Legs gets a score of C. In its current state, it is useless, don't use it. However, on the PTS, it is only 1 point now, and it is being changed to make you completely immune to fall damage. So, a pretty good change. However, again, with the competitiveness of the perk tree, I don't see many people leaning towards this. But if you're one of those people who want to use it, I mean, it does what it says on the card, so that's a plus. Looking at Guerrilla, this perk is a score of B, as it's basically just free damage. The only negative is that you have to be close to get that damage. This is a perk that I think people can pretty reliably skip out on, only because, again, you only have 15 points, and spending 3 points on a perk like this isn't necessarily ideal. Guerrilla Expert is a perk I give a score of B. It gives you plus 1% reload speed per stack of onslaught, while also giving you plus 3 maximum stacks of onslaught. This is a perk that, while it is pretty good for most Furious / Onslaught builds, I think you can forgo it and go with something that will benefit your build in a little more direct way. While yes, you will be losing out on, I believe that's 15% damage for Furious players, I think you'll be able to more than likely get that damage back by selecting other cards in this tree. So for me personally, I'm skipping out on this one. Looking at Guerrilla Master, this perk gives you plus 5% damage to close enemies per stack of onslaught, plus 5 maximum stacks of onslaught. So this is a pretty large damage increase. However, this perk will only give you that damage if you're close to the enemies, which again is something that's not going to always be active. So this is another perk that I think I personally would forego. However, if you wanted to use it, it's perfectly valid. You can use it. You might even be able to skip out on something like Adrenaline and go straight for this. Gunfu gets our first score of an S for the video. This allows you to swap targets on kill and VATS with a plus 90% damage bonus on up to 3 targets. This perk of course only works for VATS focused players, however it is easily the most important perk that any VATS focused build should run. This perk by default, ignoring the damage bonus, should be on everybody's build that's using a VATS focused build, no and, ifs, or buts. Gunrunner gets a score of F. This is just another Speed Demon alternative, so why waste your perk points on this when you can just put on Speed Demon? Looking at another Ghoul perk, Gun Tricks, this gets a score of B, as the only thing it does is boost your reload speed by 30%. While yes, that's a pretty good buff, I don't think it's justified to go and pick up that perk, only because something like Guerrilla Expert exists and you can use that to buff your reload speed by almost just as much for less cost. Gunslinger gets a rank of B, as the only thing it does is it gives you plus 12% damage to weak spots, which is something you should be hitting anyway. And taking a look at Gunslinger Expert, this gives you plus 1% weak spot damage per stack of onslaught, while giving you plus 3 stacks of maximum onslaught. So these two perks particularly go really well together, as you can combine them for even more weak spot damage. However, if you're only going to use one of these, I would suggest using the Gunslinger Expert version of it, as at 12 stacks or higher, you get the same amount of damage that you would by just putting on Gunslinger by itself, and it also costs less. Looking at the damage bonus from base to Gunslinger, it's a 48% increase on this behemoth, and looking at from Gunslinger plus Gunslinger Expert, you get plus 94% from base. So pretty good stacking bonus there. Taking a look at Gunslinger Master, this gets our second S rank of the video, as it provides a massive damage increase to slow firing weapons, with the con of it is not a universal perk. And this basically grants you access to the reverse onslaught mechanic, where you lose stacks by doing damage instead of gaining stacks by doing damage. That's why this works best on slow firing weapons, as you're able to replenish those stacks between your shots. This perk also allows you to reach 30 stacks of onslaught with all the perks equipped with the Furious Legendary effect, giving you a whopping 150% damage bonus. Everyone's favorite perk, Home Defense, lets you craft and disarm expert traps and craft expert turrets, provided you have the plans of course. This gets a score of a C because this is another perk that is not going to be on your build 24/7. You're only going to have this on realistically when you're building your camp, so you can build any kind of turret you're looking to build. And in the background you see me looking at all the different turrets you gain access to by having this perk equipped. Pretty gnarly, dude. Hyper Reflex, another perk for Ghoul players only, gets a score of B, and it provides you a 20% evasion chance, no power armor, when you have high glow. Because of the requirement for having high glow, that is why I put this perk at B tier. The 20% chance to evade is actually pretty large, so it's a welcome bonus, as evading damage these days is not an easy task. Moving on to Jaguar Speed, this gets a rank of C, as you have to have high glow, and it allows you to sprint faster, and as we talked about earlier, you don't get the benefits of being able to sprint faster or move faster when you have speed demons, since it sets you to the maximum amount of speed possible. And the reason speed is capped is they don't want you moving faster than the game can generate the space. The other perk that gets the F of shame is light-footed. While sneaking, you never trigger mines or floor-based traps. There are not enough floor traps in Fallout 76 to warrant using this perk. This is not the Sierra Madre. There are not mines everywhere and grenade bouquets laying around. It's just, don't use this perk. And having the requirement to be sneaking on top of it just sets this to be an inferior version of the ones found in other Fallout games. And with this perk tree being as competitive as it is, you cannot waste a perk slot on something like this. It's just not going to happen. Marathoner gets a score of D. At its maximum rank, sprinting consumes 40% less action points, no power armor. This, while I didn't give it an F, a D might have been too harsh, but this is a perk that essentially loses its value as you progress in the game, since AP regen does not become a problem later on, and the amount of action points you have available to you will increase pretty significantly as well. The reworked Mr. Sandman gets a score of A. Your silenced weapons do an additional 100% sneak attack damage. This is a must-have for any sneak build, with the only con of the perk being the weapon has to be silenced. And doing a quick damage test with the perk on and off, you get a 27% damage increase by having the perk equipped. So, pretty substantial damage increase for only 2 points. I'll take that any day. Modern Renegade gets a score of D. This perk is extremely situational. It only works on perks and when you're hip firing. It provides minus 45% hipfire accuracy. It provides plus 45% hipfire accuracy and plus 75% limb damage. Taking a look at the jars, you can see my reticle starts from one side and ends on the other, encompassing all of the jars, but when I put the perk on, it gets much tighter, being kind of centered on the center jar. Moving Target gets a score of B. This perk is being changed to give you plus 15% chance to evade while sprinting, no power armor, but it is a con that it requires a full sprint and also costs 3 points. So I personally would avoid this perk. Even when it's buffed, I don't see many players being able to get value out of this unless you're using something like a melee build where you'll be sprinting from target to target. Moving on to everyone's favorite melee perk, Ninja, this gets a score of A as it provides an additional 90% sneak attack bonus when using a melee weapon. In the background gameplay, I'm going to be hitting this mole miner with a power attack with a bloodied wrench with the perk on and off. As you can see in the top left corner, you saw that I hit a 2 times multiplier for 210 damage. But put on the perk, then going back to that same mole miner, we hit him for 261% with a 2.9x damage multiplier, resulting in plus 24% damage. Packinlight, the reworked version of it of course, gets an easy score of A as it provides a plus 25% action point regeneration rate while you are not over encumbered, which you should never be anyway. This is a pretty strong effect as it's basically a 1-star version of Action Boy. While yes it is weaker, it only costs 1 point, so that frees up 2 extra points for perks. This is an excellent perk that I highly suggest everyone use who is using an AP focused build, as it's a good middle ground between Action Boy and having nothing at all. Secret Agent gets a score of D. Its max rank allows stealth boys to last 4 times as long, and as a note for myself and my viewers, this seems to be more of a PvP focused perk, as you're probably not going to be using this very often in your day-to-day gameplay, just due to how rare stealth boys are. The main use for something like this in PvP is the fact that enemy players wouldn't be able to target you with VATS, so you're basically immune to people who have VATS focused builds. And I don't know the PvP meta these days, but I'm assuming everyone's using this perk, so if you're a PvPer, enjoy. Anyways everybody, that's all I have for you guys today. It was a rather long video, so I don't want to keep you guys any longer. I will have a couple more build guides coming out here soon with the updated perk cards, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.